Hey up, it's Steve from the Old Yorkshire Geek, and welcome to the next part of my series, my top 5 films from each year since I was, I still can't get it right, can I? Since the year I was born. Top 5 films from each year that I have been alive. Whatever, we're still not going to get it right, I don't know. Anyway, top 5 films. From 1979, there we go, 1979. You may recognise one of the films in there. It's a clue. So yes, this is my top 5 films, and I've got what have I got? I've got how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 honourable mentions, which we'll get to at the end. So we'll begin. These are my top 5 favourite films of the year 1979. Not necessarily the top 5 best films, they're just my favourite ones. The ones that I've probably watched more from that year than the other films. So there we go. It's they're not in any order. It's not like the first one is the best or the first one is the worst, and the last one is the best. They're not in any order. They're just it's just a list. It's not a countdown. So but before we carry on, I usually forget to say this, don't I, in my videos? But don't forget, like and subscribe and share the videos and drop a comment and hit the notification bell if you're subscribed already. I'm also on Rumble. This will be going up on Rumble and all that jazz. I've also got a Patreon page. Links in the description for all this stuff. And I've also got a store, a Spreadshirt store. You can get t-shirts and stuff, which I'm not wearing. I keep forgetting. You get t-shirts and caps and stuff like that. And mugs and bags and all sorts of things with that old Yorkshire Geek logo splattered all over it. So anyway, so that's that. Right, so off we go. We will begin with the first of my top 5 favourite films of 1979. The first one is a James Bond film. It's Moonraker. By the way, it's very sci-fi heavy, this top 5. There's 4 science fiction films and 1 horror, and one of them is a sci-fi horror. But anyway, first off, a James Bond film, Moonraker. My second favourite James Bond film. I love this. I think it's because The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker were the first 2 James Bond films I went to see at the pictures at the cinema when I was a kid. So that they've got a very special place in my heart. I know they're not the best James Bond films, particularly Moonraker, but I do love it. I do love it because it's mental. James Bond goes into space. So there we go. Anyway, this is what is it? It's the 11th of the James Bond films, directed by Lewis Gilbert, starring Roger Moore as James Bond 007. It also features, I think, the first time a Bond villain, apart from Blofeld, a henchman, would return in another Bond film in the shape of Jaws, played by the late great Richard Keel. But it wouldn't be in any more after this. It became a goodie in this film eventually. But anyway, it's a fun film where James Bond ends up in space. There's a bad guy called Hugo Drax, who's like a billionaire. He makes space shuttles. He builds space shuttles for NASA, and he's building some for himself. And he's built a space station up in orbit that somehow they can't see from Earth. They've got like anti-radar stuff on it, so it can't be picked up on radar. But it's that big, you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see it. But anyway, never mind. And he wants to kill all the humans on Earth, leave all the animals and plants, safe. And he wants to kill all the humans with this deadly poison he's developed. And James Bond has to stop him. And it's huge fun. There's a huge space battle at the end. It's mental. It doesn't make any sense. So there we go. That's James Bond, Moonraker. Next up, Star Trek, the motion picture. Some people call this Star Trek the motionless picture because they find it boring. And I've got to admit, when I first went to see this at the pictures, cinema, whatever you want to call it, movies, why did I say it like that? Movies. When I was 12, I did find it a bit boring because, I was a Star Wars kid. I'd seen the Black Hole and Moonraker and all these things with pew-pew-pews going on. That's not happening in this, apart from a couple of times. There's no phasers at all in this film. They are mentioned, but there's none at all. But I've grown to love it. I love this film, and the recent 4K release of the director's cut is astonishingly good. I love this film. So anyway, it's obviously Star Trek, carrying on from the original series from the 60s. It was originally going to be a TV series, pardon me, called Star Trek Phase 2. Again, starring William Shatner. But with the success of Star Wars, they decided, we'll make it into a film instead. So they reconstituted the sets and stuff like that, and the budget went up, and for a while this was the most expensive film ever made. It's one of those special films. I've mentioned them before: Planet of the Apes, the original King Kong, stuff like Spartacus and Ben-Hur, films like that, Ten Commandments, etc. Superman the movie, films like the special films that have a super special, they should be up on pedestals in museums. This is one of those films now. For me, is anyway. What it is, a giant cloud is heading towards Earth at warp speed. It destroys loads of, a few Klingon ships. It destroys a Federation outpost that's in space, a space station. And it's heading for Earth, and the Enterprise is the only ship that can make it in time. And Admiral Kirk, has to... don't have to, but he assumes command of the Enterprise and heads out to stop it. And we learn that there's a spaceship in the middle of the cloud called Vija, and all that stuff. And I won't spoil it for you. It's fun. I'm always saying that, aren't I? I'm always saying it's a fun film, and obviously they're fun because I wouldn't watch them if they weren't fun. But and it's a good Star Trek story. It's probably the most Star Trek of the Star Trek films. So give it a whirl and watch the director's cut with the. It's got what they call it, an overture and all that jazz. I miss stuff like overtures and intermissions in long films. Bring back intermissions. This doesn't have an intermission, but. I love overtures where they play music. I assume an overture originally in cinema times is they play music from the film as people were getting to the seats and stuff like that. That's what an overture, I imagine, was originally for. Just before the film comes on, as people are getting ready. Anyway, so there we go. So that's Star Trek the Motion Picture. Right, next up, sci-fi horror in the shape of Alien from Ridley Scott. Written by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett. It's a classic sci-fi horror which spawned 1 million copiers. It's a great film, one which we covered recently in Friday Night Appointment with Fear. It's a super classic film. This may be another one of those special films, to be completely honest. I don't know. I might. Yeah, I don't know. It's bordering on being one of those special films. It's a great film, starring Tom Skerritt, Sigourney Weaver, John Hurt, Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, Ian Holm, and Yaphet Kotto as the doomed crew of the Nostromo, a tug, like an interstellar tug that's towing a huge a huge refinery that's processing mineral ore. I don't know where they got it from, but it's heading back to Earth, and the ship stops along the way because it detects a signal of possibly alien origin, hence the title of the film. So they've got to investigate, and hijinks ensue with an alien, with the egg and facehugger and chestburster. You know the film. Everybody knows this. A brilliant film, which spawned many sequels, which I like all of them. I like all of the sequels, some more than others, but they're all fun. That word again, in their own way. So that's Alien. There we go. Next up, sticking with horror, it's Dracula from 1979, the John Badham version, starring Frank Langella. Or is it Langella? I've always said Langella, but I've heard people say Langella. Whatever. Laurence Olivier, Donald Pleasence, and Kate Nelligan. Directed by John Badham, with a great score from John Williams. It's probably my favourite version of Dracula outside the Hammer films. I think I like this even more than the Francis Ford Coppola version. It's essentially based on the stage play, like the original 1931 Dracula, based on the stage play. So it's it's a lot of people in rooms, but it's a cool film, and it looks gorgeous. It's super atmospheric. Frank Langella, however it's pronounced, excels as Dracula, but his eyes are off-putting. He's got some condition that his eyes move from side to side really fast, and it freaks me out. But he's amazing as Dracula, and all the rest of the cast shine as well. Particularly, I forgot his name. Tony Agarth as Renfield is brilliant, with the best Renfield death that I've seen in a film. Super violent, not necessarily gory, just super violent, and better than the one that we saw in Coppola's version. So there we go. It's cool. They've switched some of the characters around and changed some of the names. It's not super accurate to the book or anything, or the stage play. But it's a great watch. So there we go. And finally, the last one of my top 5 for 1979 is The Black Hole, a Disney film, Disney's first foray into live-action science fiction, I do believe. Directed by Gary Nelson, starring Maximilian Schell, Robert Forster, Joseph Bottoms, Yvette Mimieux, Anthony Perkins, and Ernest Borgnine, with voices for 2 of the robots provided by Roddy McDowall and Slim Pickens. And I absolutely adore this film. This is one of my favourite films of all time. It'd probably be my top 5 of all time. I love this film. It is fantastic. I've even got it. I've got the comic version. They brought out like not a graphic novel, but because it's not thick, but a comic version of it, and I've still got it over there somewhere from when I was young. I love this film. Great score from John Barry, and great effects. It was the first in the UK. It was the first Disney film to get an A certificate. All Disney films before this have been U, for Universal. And in America that's a G, but in the UK it was the first Disney film to get an A certificate, which means there could be scenes that scare young children. Probably PG in America, that's what it'd be. Mostly for the end part, I think, and the death of spoilers, the death of Anthony Perkins' character, which was super violent but not bloody. But anyway. It's about a ship with the crew of Robert Forster and Joseph Bottoms, Yvette Mimieux, Anthony Perkins, and Ernest Borgnine, and Roddy McDowall as the robot Vincent. They're heading home after looking for life in outer space, and they haven't found any. So they're heading back home, but they stumble across a ship that disappeared 20 years earlier, a ship which just happened to have Yvette Mimieux's dad on, called the USS Cygnus, it's next to a black hole, hence the name of the film. But it's not being pulled into the black hole, and we learned that the commander of the USS Cygnus, Maximilian Schell, Commander Hans Reinhardt, or Professor Reinhardt, has developed anti-gravity forces so the ship doesn't get pulled into the black hole. And we learn that the crew of the Cygnus came to a sticky end, sort of. I'll not spoil it if you haven't seen it, but I will spoil one thing: they go into the black hole at the end, and it's weird and kind of scary in places, especially if you pay attention, particularly to what happens to Reinhardt and his main robot, the baddie robot Maximilian, called Maximilian, oddly enough. But that's kind of creepy and scary. So I imagine that's why it got an A certificate in the UK. But anyway, I love this film. It's brilliant, and I will be doing it one day on Magnificent Mondays. That rhymes, I know. So there we go. So that's my top 5 of 1979. Right, so let's bomb through the honourable mentions. As I said, we've got 7 of them. One of them, technically, for me, wasn't in 1979, but never mind. Right, so first up, Murder by Decree, a Sherlock Holmes mystery based on the story of Jack the Ripper. After Hound of the Baskervilles, this is my the Basil Rathbone and the Hammer version with Peter Cushing. After those versions of Hound of the Baskervilles, this is my favourite Sherlock Holmes mystery. Directed by Bob Clark, who did, I think he did Porky's, didn't he? Bob Clark Porky's. And The Christmas Story. Did he do Black Christmas as well? I think he did, didn't he? Yes, he did Black Christmas, I just checked. Anyway, so there we go. So directed by him. It's very atmospheric. And it's really well made. Stars Christopher Plummer as Sherlock Holmes. James Mason, with his amazing voice as Dr. Watson. Also stars David Hemmings, Susan Clark, Anthony Quayle, John Gielgud, all-star cast, Frank Finlay, Donald Sutherland, and Genevieve. I've always pronounced it Genevieve, but I've heard people pronounce it Genevieve, whatever. Boujold. Anyway, basically Sherlock Holmes on the trail of Jack the Ripper, and of course he finds out who Jack the Ripper is. So there we go. It's a cool film. I'm supposed to be bombing through these, wasn't I? Right, we'll carry on. Next up, Phantasm. The Don Coscarelli classic. Everybody knows this one. It's the boy with the tall man, Angus Scrim, and his like his mortuary or whatever that's got the silver balls flying about in it and ding, stick in your head and drill in and suck all your blood out. That's basically it, innit? Oh, and the dwarves, like little Jawas that kidnap you, take you to another dimension. It's a cool sci-fi horror film. So there we go. So that's Phantasm. Next up, Prophecy. One we've covered in Friday Night Appointment with Fear. Not the Christopher Walken Prophecy. This is the directed by John Frankenheimer, starring Robert Foxworth, Talia Shire, and Armand Asante. It's the one where I think it's a paper mill. It's poisoning the water in this area, in these mountainous areas. I think it's in the northwest United States. And it's poisoning the water, and it's causing the animals to mutate, and it ends up being a monster movie with a huge, giant, mutant bear, and it's brilliant. I love it. So there we go. So that's Prophecy. Next up, Rocky 2, the sequel to Rocky. This one's written and directed and starring Sylvester Stallone. A great sequel to the first film. Obviously stars Sylvester Stallone, Talia Shire again, Burt Young, Carl Weathers, Burgess Meredith, all the gang from the first film, and obviously Rocky Balboa fights Apollo Creed again, and I won't spoil it for you, but it ends with Rocky probably going or pulling a face in a bloody. I hate when they do that. Why end the film in like a still frame that goes oh, and they're pulling a stupid face? But anyway, does stuff like that. So there we go. That's Rocky 2. Great film. I don't think it won any Oscars like the first film did. But I could be wrong. Next up, back to horror. The Amityville Horror from 1979. Obviously, why did I say that? I don't know. Because there was a remake which wasn't very good. Directed by Stuart Rosenberg, starring James Brolin, Margot Kidder, and Rod Steiger. It's based on the true story of the Lutz family and their house in Amityville on Long Island. Not Amity from Jaws. This is Amityville. As I said, based on the true story that they bought the house, and 28 days later they fled, leaving all their stuff behind. Whether you believe the story or not, that's up to you. I'm open-minded about it. I think some of the things that they've said happened and some of the things didn't. But I think they've embellished it slightly. But I think something weird did happen in that house. You wouldn't leave all your things behind, would you? And apparently they didn't make a huge amount of money from it, apparently, despite a best-selling novel and films and stuff like that. But I could be wrong. But anyway, it's a good film. With great performances, and this one spawned many sequels, much like Rocky and the other stuff, and Phantasm, of varying quality. Right, next up, this is the one that it's called The Concorde, Airport 79, but when it came out in the UK, I think I saw this at the cinema as well. It was called Airport 80, The Concorde, because it came out in 1980 in the UK, but I'm classing it as 79 because the rest of the world, it was a 1979 film. I really like this one. It's. I suppose it's not as good as the other airport films. We had Airport, then Airport 75, then Airport 77, weren't there? Basically, where it's like an Irwin Allen type disaster film where we get to know everybody on the plane. Everybody's got a weird, a wacky backstory, and this is no different. We've got George Kennedy, Alain Delon, Robert Wagner, Sylvia Crystal. If you know who she is, you're as old as me. Eddie Albert, and many, many more. They always have an all-star casts in these films, don't they? And you've got to go through all their backstories and all their dramas before you get to the action. And the action is somebody basically wants to blow up this plane. They keep firing missiles at it and sending fighter planes after it. But George Kennedy and Alain Delon are super ace pilots. And we see the Falcon, the Concorde, doing probably manoeuvres it can't really do. But it's got decent effects by John Dykstra, who did Star Wars and Life Force and Battlestar Galactica. So there we go. So that's Airport 79, the Concorde. And finally, the last of my honourable mentions, Monty Python's Life of Brian. A hilarious film, my favourite of the Monty Python films. It's basically the story of Jesus. Caused quite a controversy when it came out. It was banned, I think, in a few towns in the UK. The church distanced themselves from it. The General Synod said it was taking the mickey out of Christianity, and yeah, it pretty much was, and taking the mickey out of Judaism as well, and basically all religions. It was taking the mickey out of everybody, even the Romans. It's a great film. It's hilarious. Directed by Terry Jones, starring the usual Monty Python team: Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Terry Gilliam, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, Michael Palin. And it's hilarious. It even has a science fiction part in it where Brian? Yes, Brian falls from a parapet. And as he's falling, he gets picked up by an alien spaceship and heads out into space. There's a space battle, and then he comes back. The spaceship crashes in the middle of Jerusalem, or wherever they are, in Roman times. And he just crawls out, and this fella comes up and says, "You lucky bastard." It's mental. It's Monty Python. So what more can you say? Anyway, oddly, we saw this quite a lot at school. When I was at school, about 15 or whatever, we had a video club, and this got played, I think, more than any other film. Don't know why. Probably because it's got brief nudity in it. But anyway, so there we go. That's my list. That's my top 5 and my top 7 honourable mentions of 1979. We'll go through them one more time. First up, we had Moonraker. That was followed by Star Trek The Motion Picture. Then Alien. Then Dracula. That was followed by The Black Hole. And then the 7 honourable mentions were Murder by Decree, Phantasm, Prophecy, Rocky 2, The Amityville Horror, Airport 79 The Concorde, or The Concorde Airport 79, whatever. And finally, Monty Python's Life of Brian. So there we go. That's my list for 1979. Now then, we've got one more list that I've done, and then I've got to start making new lists because I've only got up to 1980. So in 1980, what we got? I've got 5 films and then 5 honourable mentions. The usual selection of sci-fi and horror. And an action adventure as well, and a bit of time travel thrown in as well, and a comedy as well. A comedy road movie, I think, if I remember rightly. Right, so we'll leave it there. So, thanks for watching, wherever you are, look after each other, and until next time, I'll say this.